So, yesterday there was a primary, and I was initially not planning on speaking about it, believe it or not, because I didn't want to come off as some referendum on, voters that voted ways I didn't like or back someone I didn't back. Um, but I have to admit the results certainly surprised me in some instances. In other cases, they kind of went along the lines that were typically drawn out. I, for one, knew that my preferred candidate for governor, Easton, the one woman that was running for the governor election, I knew she wasn't going to make it. Although with Newsom, making it to the general, I was content because he's more progressive than many of the other, standard run-of-the-mill California politicians. Which, they could have a whole day of me just riffing on all of them because they're an assortment of the issues that have impacted and negatively affected most other states in the country. They like to play party politics. They don't really do anything other than serve corporate interests. But the Senate race, it was funny because it's one of those things where people seem to misstate the purpose of entering that race. So, for example, everyone was saying, "Oh, Feinstein's going to win no matter what you want," and that was true. We all knew she was going to win, but the purpose was getting in second place. And what I really hate about the way technology has allowed people to just kind of prounce on someone else's position, even if the person is just speaking on their social media page. I've had things happen to where, I'll post about some story, and because I have a hashtag on Instagram, someone leaves some comment that is, bizarre or weird, and they don't care to elaborate on it. They just want to, I guess, mess with someone just because they're posting something. I don't get that practice, but um, in looking at the results as the final tally came in earlier today, it was funny to sit here and have people say, "Oh man, the person TYT endorsed, who I voted for, Hartson. Oh man, she only got 2% of the vote. What a letdown! What a waste! What a complete demolished state." And I kind of laughed a little bit because I said, "Well, did you not see what the runner-up got, De Leon? It was only what 10%, 11%, barely two digits." So um, a lot of times people will say it's a problem with not being known. It's a problem with this, that, and the other. And they like to place the blame on one thing instead of the other. Now, there are problems with both um, the campaign as well as the circumstance. So there are things that are out of the campaign's control and things that are in the campaign's control. And one of the problems she encountered going just early on was entering too late. You had people who announced they were running at the start of last year, and she doesn't jump in until November. So that gives you what 6, 7 months to um, reveal yourself in the largest state in the U.S. That alone should have been enough to tell them. But also, what really gets me, and this is when I was reacting last night, I was tweeting, "Oh yeah, she should run against Harris in 4 years." But then I thought about it and I said, I said the same thing with the race in West Virginia where the um, TYT Senate candidate Paula Jean Swearengin where she lost, but she was still able to get 30% of the vote in a primary with just her and the incumbent, where the incumbent had millions of dollars, and I think she had maybe hundreds of thousands. It was a very good run for someone who had never attempted before. And I had advocated that she try again in 2 years against the Republican senator from West Virginia, whose name I'm forgetting. Uh, okay, if you're from there, then I don't know what else to tell you. But to um, clarify further what I'm saying, I really thought back about it. And I said, one of the other problems was that there were so many candidates, but she contributed to that herself, whether her team wants to admit it to her or not, because you had David Hildebrand and I think it was Pat Harris, who both were aiming for the progressive vote. Now they didn't receive the same amount of attention that she got, which was already terrible to begin with, and that can be laid at the doorstep of both TYT and just every other major news group. I'm not blaming her campaign for not being exposed to the masses the way it should have been. That's just something we have to deal with, and we've had to accept as a part of this, this third way ideology that both parties are skewed to corporate interest. And there's just that's something that comes with the territory of mounting a bid that does not take corporate PAC money, that allows you to get your name in the paper and ads on TV. It unfortunately is how things are nowadays. But I looked at her percent of the vote, and I think she was just slightly above Harris. And I didn't know whether to give Harris a congratulations on getting that far without having the same amount of backers or anywhere the same amount of attention, or to get disturbed by the fact that someone who literally had nothing was able to come right under the person who had the whole progressive Justice Democrat shtick going for them. So it's very mixed signals all around. Um, but you ask yourself what can be done to avert the current circumstance. Do we start announcing we're running for things 2 or 3 years in advance? Do we just start knocking on millions of doors in that span of time? It really has served to effectively create a system where people just say, screw it, this is too much work. I'm going to let the 80-plus-year-old fossilized hag, you know, continue to serve corporate interest because she has the cash to do so. And I always, when I sit here and I look at these votes, because we all like to live in our own little bubbles of, not knowing people who like certain politicians, but I see her get a million votes. And that's not impressive whatsoever, considering the fact we're in a state with 39 million people. But you have to ask yourself, if you have an entire group that is effectively casting itself as backing establishment candidates, and still paying attention to these primaries, what do you do to get them to flip the off and on switch? Because we by and large, this is something that's in every state, we have this thing to go for the person who's polling the highest, who is being slated to be in the lead, and we don't take the time to go and look at the various ways in which that person's screwing us over, that person is deceptive. These are themes that have continued throughout just American electoral history. And, when you sit here and you watch constantly individuals just refusing to go and look up what these politicians are about, ways in which they're different from each other, I'll make it plain. I have no intention to vote for either De Leon or Feinstein, because I know it is more of the small incremental change that these politicians have been calling on the voters to accept. They've said, no, you can't have anything that's completely opposite from the other. There are no more attempts to switch things up and to reverse things and make it be a complete antithesis of what you saw before. They don't believe in that. Um, you keep trying to explain to people about the oligarchy, and it seems as if with each election you kind of run into this thing where people will swear off polls. They would say, "Oh man, um, if you watch TYT's coverage last night, for example, oh, that poll said she only had 2% of the vote, but they said there were 30% that were undecided." It was like, yeah, but the 30% that's undecided still is just going to scatter all over the place, because they're left with all these names on the ballot, and most of them don't know who any of these people are, because they're not featured on the news or in any other medium where they can just turn on the talking box in their house and have the information appear to them. So regardless of having 30% undecided, it's going to be sprinkled to each one. You have people those Republicans that beat Hartson, I'd never heard of most of them other than Bradley, who even then was still an unknown. So I keep trying to tell people it's not really up to voters to determine these elections anymore. There's a reason why 93% of um, all races are won by the person with the most cash, and it's entirely levied at the fact that you are entering a system that is not winnable. It takes a extraordinary effort, but it also is skewed so far in favor of the other group. Because think about this: if I get each person in my state to donate $1, you would think, oh, that's 39 million. You can win the election. No, no, no. You have to also factor in how many of those people know who you are, how many of those people can consistently fundraise and donate. Um, and it feels as if most of these campaigns just turn into waste of paper, even the ones that win, because even as Feinstein has been given millions of dollars, the only people that are benefiting from her being in office are those at the top who are going to say, yeah, I'll throw this cash at you in exchange for you taking some support of a tax cut that allows me to get away with paying less, but the people at the bottom pay more. And it's sad that you have literally a million people voted for that. And again, ask yourself what can be done to remedy this circumstance, because it's like if you sit here and you try to talk to people one on one, that you might get a person out of 5 or 6 to switch their views or change their opinion. But remember, you're in a state with millions of people, and you have so much time before the next election cycle. It'd be even hard right now to raise, if she started running for that term I just mentioned in 4 years, it'd be hard right now to start trying to fundraise and be on level with these corporate hacks. But again, they're able to trick you into not thinking about any of this, because they sit here and they preach to you, oh, it's just Feinstein and De Leon, just those two over and over, as if everybody else just didn't exist. So yeah, I've really tried to sit here and think about what fixes can occur um, to cause people, because even in the case of the thing in West Virginia, that was impressive for the fact that you had a person who was so less known than Manchin, the incumbent senator, that was able to pick up 3/10 of the vote. Um, and it was really sad to see people actually try to say that's no big deal. That's just whatever. It is significant for what it is. If a person who we don't know is able to rank up that much support, it tells you the incumbent's not popular. And it really should amount to something. That's what I personally believe. And I hope that uh, more people pay attention to this, because it is mind-boggling to me to sit there and think to yourself, there are 700,000 people in whatever county that swung for someone who is committed to doing nothing for them, who is openly corrupt, who is the epitome of corporations and sellouts. So I don't know what else can be done, but thank you for checking this out, and I'll come up with something else. I appreciate it.